We're not wasting any time with this video, we're jumping right into things. So, Sonic Generations is another Sonic Boost game, and as you can see, it plays much more like Sonic Unleashed than Sonic Colors, and there is a good reason for that, because this game is made by the same team who made Sonic Unleashed. Colors was made by another group within Sonic Team. Generations is what the Unleashed team, the people that actually made the Boost gameplay in the first place, went to work on next. And so, obviously, their approach to the Boost gameplay is going to be relatively the same as it was in their first game with this style. And yeah, that's pretty much exactly what this is. This game plays almost identically to Sonic Unleashed, and doesn't really take many cues from Colors at all, really. You know, you have a boost meter that you can use way more liberally again. You don't have the double jump, and the controls and feel and physics are all very, very close to Sonic Unleashed. There are some changes. Sonic's speed has been adjusted, the turning, the physics, all the little things have been tweaked up a little bit to make the game feel a bit more polished and a bit more refined. But for the most part, this is Sonic Unleashed 2, which is a good thing because Sonic Unleashed was a really fun game. And Generations makes a number of small mechanical tweaks to the Unleashed formula to make it a little bit better and fix some of the issues. For example, QTEs have been removed, which is great, because QTEs are stupid. Another thing that they've done is they've adjusted the boost meter. As I said, you can still use it pretty freely, but not nearly as much as in Unleashed. In that game, you could almost ignore the boost meter entirely, but that is not the case here in Generations. You can use it a lot, but if you're not smart, if you're not careful, and if you make a lot of mistakes, you can absolutely burn through your boost meter and have nothing left. They've added a new little thing where, at the very start, when you activate your boost, a little chunk of the meter is consumed just for starting a boost. And that means that if you start boosting a lot willy-nilly, not really knowing what you're doing, not being able to maintain your boost and keep your forward speed going, you're going to end up having to reboost over and over, and that's just going to chew through your meter so quickly. And a number of times while playing through the levels of Sonic Generations, you will find yourself running out of meter, which is something that almost never happened in Unleashed, so that is a nice improvement. And it ends up working out pretty well, because when you're first playing the game and you're not really familiar with the levels and you don't exactly know what you're doing, you will burn through your meter and you'll have to go slowly through things, but as you get better at the game and you get more efficient, you can start to play boosting constantly all the time because you're using your boost correctly, you're using it smartly, and you're not wasting it with poor performance, messing up platforming, or running into walls and things like that. It works pretty well. I would say I still kind of prefer how the boost meter is done in Colors because that really forces you to think about the boost meter and utilize it correctly. Here, it's kind of an in-between of Unleashed and Colors, and I think it's a pretty good balance at the end of the day. Sonic's homing attack has been returned to the jump button as well, so that means you have access to both the air boost and the air dash at the same time, as it always should have been, so that's good. Drifting has been adjusted, so it's much tighter and much more responsive, so a lot of people are very pleased with that, I'm sure. They've also added this cool new ramp type where you do a bunch of tricks off the ramp, and that's your opportunity to gain some meter. And with the game actually meter mattering now, these are a really good opportunity to top yourself back up. And in fact, you can even extend the meter beyond its limitations to have some extra for the following sections, which is a really cool new addition. I really like it. In many ways, Sonic Generations is exactly what you want out of a sequel. It takes what the original game was doing and refines it, improves it, fixes some issues, makes it feel much nicer and much better. It's an overall big step up from how Unleashed felt, which already felt pretty good, just had some problems here and there. Though I will say, one thing that's a little disappointing to me personally is that there's not really anything new here in Sonic Generations. Outside of, you know, removing QTEs and things like that, the gameplay is pretty much identical to Unleashed. I mean, you're looking at it, it's the same thing. It's the same game. I mean, after all, they have been able to mod Sonic Unleashed levels into Sonic Generations, and it almost feels like you're playing Unleashed because the two games are so similar, and I would have liked a little bit of more evolution of this kind of boost gameplay rather than just doing it again but better. I would have liked better and bigger, you know, more things, elaborating on what this kind of gameplay can be, rather than just doing it again. But, to be fair, the gameplay of Unleashed was already very good, and it's still very good here, and very, very fun. However, I do want to say that in some regards, I do prefer Unleashed over Generations when it comes to this Boost Sonic gameplay, because as I talked about in my Unleashed video, this type of Boost gameplay is very much QTE-like, where it's very binary gameplay. Here's a thing, press the right button to conquer that obstacle, a thing you have to slide under, a thing you have to stomp through, a thing you have to lightspeed dash across. It's just press the button and the game will do it for you. So it ends up feeling kind of like you're playing a rhythm game or whatever, and it's fun, but it's not my favorite way to do Sonic gameplay. But Unleashed made it work really well because of the absurd difficulty of that game, and with Generations, they have toned things down a lot. The game is slower than Unleashed was, I'm pretty sure. The level design is nowhere near as bullshit, quite frankly. The difficulty doesn't get nearly as high. There's nothing even remotely close to Eggman Land or any of the DLC levels or stuff like that was in Unleashed. And I totally understand why they did this, and honestly, I think it is the correct choice, because Unleashed was their first time doing this kind of Boost Sonic gameplay, and when it's your first time, you don't know how much is too much, so you just kind of go for something and see what happens. And Unleashed definitely was too much, and they realized that, and they said, okay, let's rein things in with Generations, and I do think that was actually the smart and correct choice. But personally, as someone that likes games that are a little off-the-walls crazy and maybe going a little too far and going a little too hard, the fact that Sonic Generations is no longer going too hard is something that is a little disappointing to me. It's a much more well-designed, much more refined game. It's much, much better. But I like the out-of-control craziness of Unleashed more. However, that ends up not really being that much of an issue for Sonic Generations because it has something really cool that Unleashed did not have, and that is its new approach to level design. Because while the level design does definitely have some similarities to the structure and how it's built in Generations to Unleashed, it also is different. There is a different approach here. The levels can get a lot more open-ended and have a lot more real platforming, including 3D platforming, which up to this point, between both Unleashed and Colors, there wasn't a lot of 3D platforming in this Boost Sonic gameplay. They usually reserved that for 2D stuff, and 3D was pretty much always just boosting. But here we have quite a fair amount of 3D platforming, and it's fun, and it's good, and you have much more open, wider levels, and the routes are like snaking around each other, twisting and turning, and the level design is way more complex than like any previous 3D Sonic game, and you see so many opportunities to invent your own shortcuts going from one route to another. One level in particular that really needs to be highlighted is Seaside Hill. This level is so big and wide and open and has all these different places to go, and it really does let you kind of do your own thing. It's not that kind of very guided, strict, narrow hallways that we saw in Unleashed. There's that as well, but there are a lot more of these sections where things open up and get a little bit more freeform and allow for some more player creativity. You know, in Unleashed, most of the obstacles and shortcuts and the best things to do was designed by the game intentionally of like, do this specific thing, do this homing attack chain, and then you'll get up to this higher area and you do a light speed dash and that puts you on a spring that gets you to the shortcut or whatever. Whereas in Generations, there is so much more room to create your own paths and your own shortcuts and your own ways of approaching the platforming. And that kind of fixes the issue of the lower difficulty of Generations, because I've played Generations so much that at this point, in order to improve my times, I have to do such ridiculously hard skips and shortcuts and big crazy boost jumps and things like that. And getting clean runs when I'm trying to do all these crazy things is so difficult. It's some of the hardest time attacking I've had in any of the Sonic games I've played up to this point for the video series. And it's really satisfying when you do finally nail it. Not only am I playing well and hitting all those tricks and everything, but I got to come up with these tricks. I realized, hey, if I bounce off of that enemy, then I can not bother with this whole platforming thing and fly past it all. But then I have all this speed and I'm gonna fucking die if I land in that pit, so I have to aim myself very precisely to land where I want, which is very difficult, and I have to figure out a way to do that. There's this big gap right here, and you're supposed to platform it using all these different floating platforms, but if you do this really precise boost jump, then you're good, but man, is that boost jump hard to do, and all these kinds of things. While Unleashed, from a design perspective, was a bit off the rails, the actual gameplay of that game did feel very on rails, where paradoxically, Generations is more controlled and less crazy, yet it allows you to do more crazy things, which is great. It's not a bad trade-off at all. I think the ideal boost game for me would be something that had the strengths of both Unleashed and Generations together at the same time. But this slightly different flavor of this same kind of boost gameplay, it works, man. It's still super fun. And these more open levels that allow for creativity, they're fantastic. And I really do need to highlight the level design of Sonic Generations. I think that it is brilliant overall. I would say that this game across the entire board has probably the best level design of any Sonic game, period. When you really play these levels a lot and explore them and learn all the different routes and see how they're built and they're constructed, you realize how smart everything is laid out. Like, I am very impressed with how freaking good the level design in this game is. It doesn't just follow Sonic level design rules perfectly. I would say this sets the standard of the ideal way to approach Sonic level design. The multi-tiered paths, the harder paths at the top being faster, it is perfection in Sonic Generations, as far as this type of boost Sonic gameplay is concerned. I still would prefer something that didn't rely on this very strict guided boost QTE-like gameplay, something that was more of just a general freeform physics-based platformer. But as far as this type of Sonic gameplay goes, it does not get any better than Sonic Generations. They nailed it. This is everything that this gameplay could possibly be. Though one thing I do want to mention is, while I find this kind of boost Sonic gameplay to be, in a way, fundamentally flawed, I still find it fun for the most part, but there are some aspects of this gameplay style for Sonic that I just do not like. I think one of the biggest ones that I would highlight is quick step sections. These are really weak across all of these boost Sonic games, if you ask me, except for maybe Unleashed because it's so difficult that it kind of pushes it a bit. But outside of that, every single one of these sections is the same exact thing across every level, every game. It always feels exactly identical. You have a couple of lanes, you go left and right to avoid obstacles, sometimes you hop over something or slide under something, whatever. It all just feels exactly the same, and of course it does. This is extremely basic gameplay. This is the kind of stuff that you see in, like, mobile endless runners. Like, why is this the kind of gameplay we're relying on for a Sonic game? And it's significantly less fun than the other gameplay you find in boost games, and it even slows down the pacing. My least favorite level in Sonic Generations is City Escape because of this, because you have the main chunk of the level, and it's good old-fashioned boost Sonic gameplay, and it's really fun, but then you get to the end of the level, and it's this giant quick-step section when you're running from the truck. And it goes on for so long, and the gameplay pacing here is so slow compared to what you were doing before. You know, boost here, homing attack these enemies, air dash into the wall jump, then do a light speed dash into the ring that launches you onto a rail, and then you do a big boost jump, and then you stomp into the boxes to hit the dash panel that launches you forward, and you do all this stuff in such quick succession. You're always active, you're always playing. And then you get to a quick step section, and it's left, right, left, left. It sucks. This gameplay is slow, and it's boring, and it's shallow, and it's terrible. And rail grinding has been turned into the exact same thing too, which also sucks. You know, rail grinding used to be a fantastic mechanic back in the Sonic Adventure 2 and Sonic Heroes days, but now it's just a quick step, but it looks a little bit different. Of all the issues the Boost Sonic gameplay has, I think that quick stepping is probably the biggest one, and I would say this gameplay should just be completely removed from this gameplay style, because it's just not good. But outside of that issue, I think the core Sonic gameplay here in Sonic Generations is fantastic. I would put it up there with some of the best Sonic games ever made. It's super duper fun. But, of course, we can't just have the core Sonic game. After all, this is a Sonic Team game, which means we have to shove some kind of game-ruining bullshit into the game. Some kind of alternative playstyle that nobody wants to do and no one asked for, and it's gonna make the entire thing null and void. You know, Colors didn't have anything like that, so we gotta make up for it. We need to have something really terrible to ruin our fantastic Sonic game like we have done with so many of our previous games, right? So what did they do this time? What did they come up with? How did they possibly ruin this Sonic game? What are we doing instead of playing a Sonic game? What's the alternative gameplay? Well, in Sonic Generations, the alternate gameplay, instead of playing a Sonic game, is playing a Sonic game. What's going on here? This isn't okay. No, this isn't right. This can't be the alternate gameplay in this game. Where's the shmup? Where's the RTS? I know there has to be something here ruining this game. We can't just have a fun Sonic game the entire time. This is a Sonic Team game. What's happening? I don't really know, but there is no other alternative gameplay in Sonic Generations. It's just the Boost Sonic gameplay and this classic 2D Sonic gameplay. And I think the classic gameplay here in Sonic Generations is really fun. Now, right off the bat, I will say this does not have accurate 2D classic Sonic physics. And I'm okay with that. I've said it multiple times in the past. I don't need original Genesis Sonic physics to find a Sonic game fun. What matters is, are the game's physics good and fun on their own? And I would say that Sonic Generations definitely is. And it's not that far off of classic Sonic physics. In fact, while I was playing, it felt close enough to classic Sonic physics that I kind of thought I was playing that. So I would try to do things that work in the classic games, and then it wouldn't work here, and it would mess me up, and I'd be like, oh yeah, that's right, this doesn't work like that. But after a while, you get used to how Generations works, and then the game feels perfectly good. The classic physics are definitely better, no doubt, but this is more than playable. It's very fun. And to complement this pretty good game feel, the fantastic level design from Sonic Generations is not just in the modern levels, it's in the classic levels too. I think these levels are wonderfully designed. They're so much fun to play. And when it comes to speed, that's when you gotta learn about the more advanced elements of classic Sonic gameplay. One thing I would criticize here is the spin dash, and its functionality is a little weird in this game. You can still do the classic, you know, crouch and mash the jump button to spin dash, but there's actually no reason to do that, and it's quite ineffective, because instead you can just hit the X button, and that is your spin dash button, and you can just trigger a spin dash whenever you want. Kind of similar to Sonic Adventure. Even if you're moving, you can just immediately start charging a spin dash, which in classic Sonic would be a big no-no. But here, I think it ends up working out okay, because this game is designed differently than the classic Sonic games. And I don't exactly know why they did this, but for whatever reason, the X button charge spin dash is ridiculously powerful. It is insane. It launches you with so much speed. You can't even see what's happening when you launch off with this thing. And of course, that means it enables you to do all kinds of bullshit. And when you get the hang of it, and you know what you're doing, you're familiar with the level design, you can do so much cool stuff with this thing, and it is so much fun. Kind of reminds me a bit of Sonic Advance 3, where it's like, I don't want this crazy overpowered movement all the time, but for one game, this is fucking fun, and I'm all about it. And it gives classic Generations a unique, distinct type of 2D Sonic gameplay that you don't get in any other 2D game, which is nice. Unlike the Boost gameplay here, which is basically just unleashed again, there's no other Sonic game that plays quite like classic Generations. So it ends up being a unique type of Sonic gameplay that feels familiar, but a little bit different, doing a bit of its own thing, and it's super fun, and the brilliant level design just makes it all that much better. And we have Red Rings returning from Sonic Colors, and I want to say, I think I underpraised Red Rings in my Colors video. Red Rings are actually super fun to collect, especially in Generations with how good the level design is. I want to see all of the levels. I want to take all the different routes and see everything that this game has to offer, and hunting for Red Rings gets you to do that, and it's so good. You get to see all these cool areas, do all this fun platforming, and realize how everything is connected together and how all the routes weave in and out of each other, and you see how smart the level design is. Hunting for Red Rings is legitimately one of the best things they've added to Sonic games in a long time, and I think Generations does it even better than Colors did, and that game already did it really well. They've also brought in the skill system, kind of returning from Sonic and the Secret Rings, where you can make loadouts of different skills that are worth different points, and you have a maximum of what you can equip, so you gotta pick and choose what you want to use, and that's kind of neat, but it's ultimately not that consequential to the game. Still ends up ultimately playing mostly the same, but there are a couple of abilities in here that are pretty cool. Particularly Classic Sonic has some neat stuff where you can have the Electric Shield or Fire Shield or things like that, complete with their abilities for Sonic 3 and Knuckles, allowing you to approach levels in different ways and platform, and that's pretty cool, though I kind of would prefer if maybe these shields were just incorporated into the levels like they were in Sonic 3 and Knuckles. But this ends up working, and it's still pretty fun. And Super Sonic is also available through this system for both Classic and Modern Sonic, which is neat, but it's kind of underwhelming in this game. For Classic Sonic, he doesn't have higher jump or acceleration. I don't even think he has higher top speed. It's just the invincibility, which is a very neutered Super Sonic. And then for Modern Sonic, they've added this weird thing where you start, like, flying and he consumes bolts super quickly. So you don't really even get to use Super Sonic that much, and when you do, it's just you skipping the game, so it's not even really that fun. Very weird choices of how they chose to do Super Sonic in this game, and it's a bit disappointing, but whatever, it's not that big of a problem. Just play normally. And as far as ranking system is concerned, Sonic Generations does one of my preferred things with Sonic games. The ranking system here is based primarily on your completion time. So that means that the game is fundamentally designed primarily around beating the level as quickly as you can, which is part of the reason the level design is so good here, because it's all very focused and all built on that one core idea. Unfortunately, the ranking system here, while great on principle, in practice is pretty negligible because the S-rank times are extremely forgiving. You do not have to play these levels very quickly or very efficiently to still get S-ranks, which is disappointing, but, you know, I'm a time attacker. I just do it because it's fun. I don't need S-ranks to motivate me to do it. These levels are fun enough that I just run them over and over and over just 'cause. And like I talked about in my Sonic Adventure 2 video, when you have two different gameplay styles for a game, you run the risk of players liking one gameplay style more than the other, and thus they would prefer to just be doing that one better gameplay style than the other. But Sonic Generations manages to avoid that issue for the most part because both of these gameplay styles are incredibly fun. And though I do prefer one over the other, I'm happy to play both of them at any time. And I imagine this is probably the unpopular opinion, but personally, I actually prefer the classic levels in this game over the modern ones, primarily because the modern gameplay focuses a lot on flair and flashiness and cool big set pieces, which means a slower gameplay pacing, and of course the boost gameplay has less emphasis on platforming, whereas the classic levels are pure platforming the entire time, and they don't have nearly as much intrusive big fancy camera angle set piece things where you're not actually doing anything. It is gameplay, gameplay, gameplay the whole time that you're playing, which makes it more fun for me. I also find there's a bit more depth to wrangling the insane power of the spin dash in this game, which I think is really, really fun. But at the end of the day, my preference is a very minor one. Both gameplay styles in this game are really fun, and I'm happy to play any level in this game, except maybe Classic Planet Wisp. That one level is kind of a pain in the ass, but everything else here is fantastic. And I gotta say, this game has a pretty good amount of content for a Sonic game like this. we have a total of 18 full Sonic levels, and it's not like other Sonic games where we reuse level design or pad things out or anything. It is 18 whole, totally unique levels with unique assets and everything for all of it. Of course, the individual zones themselves do reuse assets, but they don't reuse level design or level sections or chunks or anything like that. We just get a ton of fantastically designed, big, super fun Sonic levels in this game. It is awesome. Though there is one small thing I do want to comment on. Not really an issue or anything, but you know how Colors has all that negative backlash about how it's a 3D game, but really it's a 2D game because most of it is 2D gameplay? Generations kind of gets a similar rap sometimes, and it is fair when you think about it. We have a game where half of it is 2D gameplay, and the other half of it is half 2D gameplay and half 3D gameplay. So this game is like 75% 2D gameplay, so similar to Sonic Colors, it is kind of mostly a 2D Sonic game, and I don't think that's an issue on principle fundamentally. However, when I do look at Sonic Generations, I do feel that maybe that was a bit of a mistake. You know, we have two Sonics here, one dedicated to old school 2D Sonic gameplay, and then one dedicated to more current 3D Sonic gameplay. So it does feel pretty redundant to have modern Sonic switch between 2D and 3D gameplay when we have a whole dedicated 2D gameplay style. And I think maybe it would have been cool if they tried to make the modern levels of Sonic Generations fully 3D with no 2D sections. I understand why they didn't want to do that, because as I mentioned in my Unleashed video, the boost gameplay is fairly shallow, and so switching between 2D and 3D is a way to vary things up. But with the quality of the level design here, especially in the 3D sections with how open they can be, I feel like maybe if they went for it, they could have done it. You know, experiment, be a little daring, be a little bold, and see if you can do fully 3D boost Sonic gameplay. I think that could work in Sonic Generations, and then we would have had a more even split of 2D Sonic in Classic, 3D Sonic in Modern, and that probably would have worked really well, I think. So that's a bit of a missed opportunity, in my opinion. But it's not really an issue or a criticism or anything. But perhaps Sonic Generations could have ended up being even better if they dared to try something like that. So thus far, this game is turning out to be pretty spectacular all around. And that is not okay, because this is a Sonic Team game. Where's the bullshit? Where's the crap? Where's the part of this game that sucks? Surely the boss fights. It's gotta be the boss fights. They're always terrible in every Sonic game. Well, not so here in Sonic Generations. I wouldn't say the bosses are amazing in this game, but for the most part, they are good and fun, and I like them, which is not a very common thing in a lot of Sonic games. The bosses here are very typical, very standard kinds of designs that you see in a lot of video games, but they're pretty well executed for the most part. The highlights, I think, would be the bosses of the Adventure era, Shadow and Perfect Chaos. Shadow is a fight where you're kind of racing against him, both boosting and trying to collect these power-ups, and mechanically and design-wise, it's not like a super fun fight or anything, but it just feels cool. Racing with Shadow in the context of, you know, the final battle of SA2 redone in this kind of way. It's way better than the actual battle between Sonic and Shadow in that game. And Perfect Chaos, that just makes all the sense in the world, because the supersonic gameplay in SA1 was kind of akin to boost gameplay in a way. You're running down hallways, you're building up all this speed to go over the water, and now you can just insert the boost in that, and it just works. But what's particularly cool about the Perfect Chaos fight here is that it's not even really a boss fight, it's just a level that you play through with a big enemy in the background. So it's just another fun Sonic Generations level to play, which is certainly a good time, but I would argue that's a little bit of cheating. I'm not gonna say that's an amazing boss fight, because it's not a boss fight, it's just a level. Still, fun is fun, and I'll take it. The only boss fight in Sonic Generations that I think is actually bad is the final Supersonic boss fight, which of course is the norm, but this one in particular, I really don't even know how to fight this boss, despite the fact that I've beaten this game 100 times in my life. I still don't really understand what to do here. You just kind of boost forward and switch between the two Sonics when the game tells you to, I guess, and it feels like, am I gaining on him? I don't really know. I can't really tell, and then you get close and you can kind of try to attack where you, like, shoot the other Sonic at him, I think, but it doesn't end up really working, and then you just kind of ram into it, and it's just all kinds of awkward and weird, and I've never understood how this fight works, and it's really shitty. But whatever, it's over in a couple of minutes, and it's like the only part of this game that I think is particularly weak thus far. But that can't be the only problematic part of the game, because it's a Sonic Team game. There's gotta be something here that ruins the game. We got fun gameplay, decent bosses. No, it's here somewhere. I know it. There's something that ruins this game. It's hiding. Where is it? It's here somewhere. I'm gonna find it. It's gotta be the padding, right? Almost every Sonic game suffers from padding, even the best ones. There's gotta be some kind of horrible game-ruining padding here that's gonna annihilate the pacing and make the game super unfun to play. And aha! This is where I gotcha, Sonic Generations, because like many previous Sonic games, Sonic Generations has a bunch of missions you can play, where they take the main levels of the game and remix a small section of them and then make you play it, maybe with some kind of objective or whatever. And these have always been so mediocre in every Sonic game leading up to this point. Like, probably the best version of this maybe was Chaotix and Heroes or Shadow the Hedgehog. But for the most part, these are always very negligible, boring, not very fun, not very interesting. And Sonic Generations forces you to play some of these missions. For the most part, they're optional, but every time you complete all the main levels in an era, before you can move on to the main boss of that era, you have to complete at least one mission per zone. Aha! I knew this game was padded out. They force you to play these crappy, mediocre missions. This is the thing that's going to ruin Sonic Generations, right? Right? Well, not really, because as I said, you only have to play one mission out of 10 per zone, so these missions, at their worst, are pretty unobtrusive, and a lot of them aren't even that long. Most of them you can complete in under a minute, and if you really don't even want to do these missions, then there are time trial missions where you just play the main level again and beat it under a certain time. Which is like, oh, do a time trial of these super fun, replayable Sonic games? Oh my god, how could you possibly tell me to do that? And you know what? These missions themselves, they're not bad. A lot of them are actually decently fun. I was surprised at how good of a time I was having completing all these, because a lot of them just take a section of the level and change up the level design and say, get to the end. So it's kind of just more Sonic Generations platforming goodness that you get to play. Of course, there are some more gimmicky ones and ones that are weaker than others, but for the most part, these missions range from, they're okay to pretty fun, which makes them the best missions that have been in any Sonic game up to this point, and I didn't have a bad time playing through these at all, really. Except this one with Vector. This one kind of fucking sucks. I would say that the fact that they do pad out the game a little by forcing you to play some of these missions is a little harmful to the pacing of the game, but it's a very, very minuscule issue that really doesn't hurt the experience whatsoever at the end of the day. Which is a problem, because that's all there is to Sonic Generations. You got the two gameplay styles and all their levels, which is really, really fun. You have boss fights that are pretty good. You have missions that are decent and not too obtrusive. There's no horrible pacing, there's nothing ruining the game here, there is nothing. There really aren't any major problems in Sonic Generations whatsoever. The biggest issue I would say this game has is because it's by the same team that made Unleashed, it has a little bit of that same responsiveness issue that Unleashed had. Sometimes when you get to certain parts of the levels, some of your buttons just will not work. You try to do something, and it just does not happen. There's something wrong with how this game reads inputs or something like that, and it's weird, because Sonic Colors didn't have this problem. But Unleashed did have it, and this is the same team, and so unfortunately this game has that same problem, and it can get pretty frustrating sometimes. But that's it. That is the only problem I can find with Sonic Generations. This is just an all-around solid package for a Sonic game, similar to Sonic Colors, where I'm kind of just stunned that the game is just all-around really good. But Generations, it's more than that. I don't think this game is just really good overall, or even great. I think this is a fantastic game. Not a fantastic Sonic game, not a game that has fantastic parts. This is a fantastic video game, and is perhaps the least flawed Sonic game that has ever been made. There's nothing in this game that I don't like to some degree. And I'm approaching all this with this kind of tone of disbelief because, in a way, I do disbelieve this game after all of the games that Sonic Team has made up to this point. This game is an anomaly. You know, Sonic Colors, that was a good game, but it did have some issues here and there still. This game, however, no, it's just great. It doesn't have any of the giant fundamental problems that every single Sonic Team game has had since Sonic Adventure. They didn't make any of their trademark stupid decisions or giant glaring mistakes or put in things that ruin the game. They just made a fantastic game, and that doesn't feel right for a Sonic Team game. This game feels like it wasn't made this good on purpose. It has to be some kind of accident where Sonic Team, the planets aligned, and somehow they managed to crank out a phenomenal video game. It really does feel like an anomaly when you look at all the games both before and after Sonic Generations. This one is a bizarre outlier. I don't know what went right with this game's development, but they fucking nailed it. They did a great job, and while Sonic Generations isn't maybe necessarily my favorite Sonic game, on a more objective scale, when you look at this overall, it's easy for me to say that this is the best Sonic game that's ever been made. It's just so good, so fun, so fantastic, and there's no bullshit, there's no problems, it's just great. It's just a great game, and you just play it and you have a ton of fun the entire time. It's wonderful. I literally, and I mean that in the actual definition of literally, cannot believe this game exists. It's too good. And it's unfortunate that this is some irregular peak for Sonic, because I wish that this could be the standard of quality that we saw in every Sonic game, but sadly, that's just not the world we live in. But whatever, man, I'll take it. Sonic Generations is just fucking incredible. I love this game. And honestly, my biggest problem with it is some of the zone choices, like Seaside Hill for Sonic Heroes. I mean, that's a good level, but come on, man. How did they not go with Egg Fleet? Egg Fleet would have been so sick in this game. And that's my other big issue with Sonic Generations. Why did this game never get DLC? Just bonus levels, extra zones for every era? That would have been free money for Sega. They could have just pumped out zone packs for Sonic Generations for years, and people would have loved it. And when my biggest criticism for a game is that I want more of it, you know you got yourself a damn fine video game.